Welcome to Tales of Hope, where every paw print counts. Animal tie in the house, spreading love, hear the sounds. Every week animal stories, rights and welfare in the mix. Step up, take action, we're giving animals a fix. Tales of Hope, raise your voice, make some noise. Change the game for every animal, girl and boy. One world, one fight, let's turn the page. A future for the voiceless, bring hope to center stage.
A very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our listeners around the world. Today we have a very wonderful soul with us, Jill Robinson from Animals Asia, founder and CEO. Jill, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time from your busy schedule to be on the show.
It's a pleasure, Anil. Delighted to speak with you.
Thank you so much. Now, Jill, without further ado, was there a defining moment or an encounter that made you realize this work had to become your life's mission? And how did that moment actually shape the values of Animals Asia still stands for today?
Yes, Anil, absolutely. There was a defining moment. It's kind of well documented. It happened in 1993. I've been in Asia since the mid 1980s, living in Hong Kong. And I was working with the International Fund for Animal Welfare as their sort of Asia investigator, if you like. And I got a call from a friend of mine who was a journalist who said he'd just come back from a bear farm. And he just said, you need to go and see it. And my interest was piqued. So I hopped over, grabbed a couple of friends. We joined a group of tourists from Japan and Taiwan, and we found ourselves on a bear farm in southern China. And the farmer and his wife were really sort of trying to sell the bear bile to the tourists. But we knew that there was a room where the bears were kept to have their bile extracted for use in traditional medicine. And so we broke away from the group and we went down into a basement and we found these bears in cages. And I just remember walking around in absolute shock by what I was seeing. The bears were obviously in a lot of pain. They were very, very miserable. And as I was walking around, I felt something touch my shoulder and I turned around only to see a female moon bear with her paw stretched through the bars of the cage. And my instinct straight away was to take that paw, and instead of hurting me, as she really should have done, because she didn't know the difference between, myself and other humans that were obviously hurting her, she just squeezed my fingers very rhythmically, and I can still feel her claws on my fingertips, even talking to you now. And that moment between us, I think, changed everything in my life, because I knew then that I probably would never see her again. But I knew too that she had changed everything, and that the rest of my life would be devoted to addressing the industry of bear bile farming and, working with governments, with non-government organisations, with traditional medicine experts, with the media, with celebrities, with everybody to both understand what does bear bile farming mean and, how we address it, and eventually, I think over the years, how we end it.
Well, I think we all have had our defining moments and our callings when it comes to being the medium to do the work that we do. That's what I believe. I think we've all had our defining moments. Now, Animals Asia operates at the intersection of rescue, education, and policy. Over the years, which of these has surprised you most in the ability to shift real-world outcomes for animals?
Gosh, Anil, that's a really interesting question, because I think, as you have obviously asked and are assessing, actually they're all interwoven. They are all Sorry.
No, please, please, please. It's not, because I think, it's not only just related to the bears or to a certain segment of animals, because if you look at it, everything is interconnected, whether it comes to law, whether it comes to policymakers, and all these people, are interconnected. And today, I mean, given the situation that we are going through in India, first of all, I'm sorry, I really should have done this. I really want to, thank you on behalf of all the Indian animal lovers for writing the letter to the Supreme Court of India. We really, really appreciate that.
Oh gosh, you're so welcome, Anil. It was a cause very close to my heart. And I'd had a couple of requests to do that to help the dogs in your community. And I really wish you every bit of luck with your campaign. I hope it's successful.
Well, to be honest, I will not go into that right now, and I'll send you all the details what's actually happening. But at the moment, we are still at a standstill. To be honest, being brutally honest, humanity and compassion, which is supposed to be upheld by the stakeholders or the lawmakers, we are hoping and praying better sense prevails at this point in time. But we're just keeping our fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, you have them crossed here as well for you all.
Well, we always have to have hope and pray for the best sort of outcome that comes out.
Yeah. No, absolutely. While I wasn't, in terms of your question, I did want to answer it because although policy and education and rescue are intertwined, you're right, we do sometimes see surprises. And I think one of those is quite a remarkable project that we've been embarking on here in China for the last few years. And that's human-wildlife conflict. So where I think, again, you're going to have these same issues in India. So, for example, here in Sichuan province, where we have bears that are encroaching into human habited areas. So where farmers are trying to raise their crops or raise their livestock, and they're now seeing bears come into these areas so that they will, eat the food, or they'll sometimes, kill the livestock or hurt the farmers, etc. So we worked on this for a long time with the government in Sichuan and with the local community. And this is where we saw, I think, policy and education come sweetly together and start to resolve this issue now. With the use of electric fencing, which we've been helping to fund along with the various cities and areas together with the Chinese government, and finding now that there is some degree of success, and that not only are bears not coming into these habitats anymore and encroaching on the farmland, but actually other species now, it's working for them. So they're also addressing the intrusion of wild boar and macaques, and seeing again that these animals, like the bears, are no longer intruding into areas where there are humans. So it's obviously not only protecting the human population, but it's protecting those animals as well from being, hurt or even killed if they're killing livestock. So it's a wonderfully win-win outcome from education and policy working together.
I think it is also the willingness of the stakeholders involved, to partake. And as you said, education and policy will go hand in hand, whether it is wildlife or whether it is any sort of animal and human, when they come at a junction where both of us have to coexist. And I think it is only if there is an openness and understanding that we all need to coexist. But I think we humans have, we think everything just belongs to us and we can do whatever we like.
I'm afraid we do, Anil, and it's something that, more and more people are now acknowledging that. And I think coming together and collaborating more. And that's what we really, I think, together as a community, as a village, we need to encourage, don't we?
Absolutely. And to be honest, that is how this podcast was born. Even that is what it's the fruit of labor of love towards these voiceless souls. And that's how it all started. I started putting it all together and connecting people and connecting, it's like, as you said, being with the people who believe in the same cause, sort of thing.
Yes, yeah, I read that, and I think it's a marvelous, marvelous thing that you've done. And I just hope that such podcasts can be evolving as a result of your inspiration. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Keeping my fingers crossed. Now, can you share a moment where a government authority or a community initially resisted change, yet eventually shifted their stance, and what truly made the difference?
Yes, I can. In Vietnam, this was a very good example because, your listeners, I'm not sure if they'll know what bear farming is, but just very quickly, where bears are held in tiny wire cages and extracted of their bile for the whole of their lives for use in traditional medicine. And it's an industry now that we're seeing increasingly is being phased out and ended because there are an abundance of both herbal and synthetic alternatives to take its place. But way, way back in 1999, actually, when we first started working in Vietnam, we used to go with the government officials on bear farm investigations, and they would, talk very openly about the methods of bile extraction, which were extremely cruel. And I won't shock your listeners by sort of elaborating more, but over time, we were saying, we were talking with them about some of the solutions, but they seemed to just let it go on. They really turned a blind eye to the industry until it was in 2005. We said, look, we'd love to invite you to our sanctuary here in China, where illegal bear farms have been closed down, and we've been given permission, and we've collaborated with the government to rescue those bears. And finally, the Vietnam government came along with us, and they just saw this extraordinary place, with 10 beautiful enclosures and bear houses and special care areas and a functioning veterinary hospital and an education centre. Just the whole thing, I think, just unfolded in front of their eyes as a solution to ending bear farming in Vietnam. And as they said, even then, bear farming was illegal, but we often heard them say, it may be illegal, but if a farm if a farm closes, what's going to happen to the bears? And now suddenly, here in front of their eyes, as we hosted them here in China, they had the answer for themselves. And from that second, it was an absolute game changer. And we began to finally build a sanctuary in Vietnam. We have 2 sanctuaries now in the country, one in the north in Tam Dao, one in central Vietnam in Bac Ma. And I think most extraordinary of all is that this is the first time in history that a country now has the building blocks and has the momentum and the promise of ending bear farming, which they are promising to do by this year, no less. And so this has been a 30-year journey for Animals Asia, and now finally we're on the cusp of ending bear farming in Vietnam.
Wow. That is such an inspirational story. I'm sure listeners are going to be inspired by this. It is all, I think, more of belief and the hard work that you all have put in ending bear farming in Southeast Asia as it is, or in Vietnam and China, as you've been talking about. And to be honest, most of my early years was in Hong Kong and Taiwan, to be honest. In mid-80s to mid-90s, I was based in Hong Kong and Taiwan, and I've traveled to most of these places. Not only traveled, but I've lived in Hong Kong and Taipei for most of my 10 years of my life.
Gosh, that's such a coincidence. We came over to Hong Kong, obviously, at the same time, mid 80s.
I think it was around, for me, it was 87. That's the time. And from 90s, early 90s, I was based out of Taipei. And then from 96 onwards, I was based in Singapore till 2007.
Gosh, what a journey, Anil.
Yes, absolutely. Now, many rescued moon bears arrive after years of physical and psychological trauma. Could you walk us through the rehabilitation journey, and particular bear who changed how you understand recovery?
Yes. Um, I can. It's a long journey, and the reason I hesitated is because we have been rescuing bears since the mid 1990s, and that was at a time when we knew nothing about the industry and nothing about the pathology of these bears. So it was very much, our learning curve was totally vertical. But to the present day, I can honestly say that we have the most amazing teams in both China and Vietnam that are able to work with the authorities and, rescue the bears and bring them to our sanctuaries. And the sophistication of these rescues has changed beyond all measure, I have to say, over these last decades as well, since we were doing this. But I learn a lot now from the very team that are rescuing these bears. And let me take you through perhaps in Vietnam, where when after that they're rescued and they're brought into our quarantine area at the sanctuaries, first of all, it's really observation. It's just looking at these bears and understanding what are their physical wounds, what is their psychological state of mind, how can we help them in the best way. And obviously, if they've been caged on farms, they haven't had the best diet. They've obviously not had the best treatment because they've had their bile extracted. And they're obviously very often in a lot of pain. So those three things, as soon as you can start looking at their nutrition and giving them tasty, wonderful food that they've never had before in their lives, immediately you're trust building. Then you're looking at the problems, the pathology, and thinking, well, what do we have to do? Do we have to do major abdominal surgery? Do we have to have an immediate health check to look at all these issues? Or can we just start to build them up slowly to encourage the trust between carers and the bears themselves? And then also looking at what sort of medication they need as well, and just, popping them onto antibiotics or painkillers, removing the pain that obviously has been a part of their distrust, in the past. And now you're looking at bears that are, maybe looking out from their recovery cages in quarantine without, with less caution, with more trust, and just observing the new world in front of them, in front of them. And once they've sort of come through about 30 days in quarantine, then we can be ready to start putting them into dens that look out onto beautiful grassy enclosures and to other bears that are out in those enclosures too. So then they are becoming so curious about the world around them. They can see grass that they've never, trodden on before in their lives. They can see blue skies and sunshine. They can see rain and smell these, experiences as well. So their sights and their sounds and their smells are absolutely on fire, to the point where ultimately our team can now start to integrate them together with cohorts. They can start playing with other bears for the first time in their lives. They have choices to stay out in the sunshine or walk around in the rain with that beautiful, sweet smelling rain on their backs, or they can go back into their dens anytime they like and go into individual beds where they feel safe and secure, for days into the evenings, whatever their choice tells them that they want to do. And I think that in itself, has given us the most the most wonderful intelligence into this remarkably intelligent species. When we think we know everything about a moon bear, we realize that we don't, and there is still so much learning to do. And there was one bear in particular. I think, you spoke before, or I saw in one of your messages about learned helplessness. And that is exactly what a rescued bear called Dawn had. She shrank into the corner of her cage after we rescued her as she was recovering in quarantine. She pressed her head against the bars of the cage. She would engage in stereotypic behaviour and weave backwards and forwards. And again, our team realised that she was in a severe, not just physical state, but psychological condition as well. And so even things like new noises were causing her to be extremely stressed. And so they invented things like playing white music, music to take away those noises that were making her feel uncomfortable, so that this consistent music, she had that in the background to make her less nervous. She again had good food. She was responding to medication, to pain relief, to kindness from our team, soft words, enrichment throughout the day, just so much that ultimately after, it took several weeks before finally she began to come out of her shell and again be the curious and indeed happy bear that we see today outside of the enclosure. And it's so wonderful, Anil, to see that transition of bears that had absolutely no hope in their minds, because whatever they thought that, whatever happened to them, even if they got nice food, just round the corner, something terrible was going to happen to them. And finally, Dawn broke through that, and she turned learned helplessness into learned happiness for the first time in her life.
Wow, that's so beautiful. You mentioned a very good point, which I am experimenting at this point in time, where you said music heals, these animals as well. I have been experimenting with quite a bit of music, which works with the frequencies that can help. I'll be more than happy to share that music links with you and see if something works out with these animals, because I'm trying to work with my dogs at this point in time, because I have now, as of today, I have 4 at home, and 7 I take care. 6 I take care at my mother's compound where she stays.
Wow.
Yes, so I have been, because as I come from more of the music business, and that is something I've been trying to toy around with. The idea is to, work with the different, calm them. There's all these different moods and all that. That's the kind of music I've been working in the last 6 months, trying to see what is the best outcome. And when you mentioned it, that really hit a nerve. I'll be more than happy to share all the links and the music and see if it can work with these, beautiful souls.
We'd love that, Anil. Thank you. We are really an open book. There is nothing sort of that's off limits, as long as they're all humane, of course. And something like this, if you have outcomes that you would like to share, with dogs, why on earth wouldn't we not at least, try it with the bears and understand if there's a positive response to that? So thank you.
Please, I would be more than glad to share all these details with you, because that's what I'm trying to work on. Now, how do you navigate the delicate balance between respecting cultural context and standing firmly for animal welfare, especially when harmful practices are defended as tradition?
Oh, goodness. Well, that's a really, really good question, because, I've covered a little bit about bear bar farming, but it would be quite nice to move on to another project that we have that takes elephants out of elephant riding tourism. And, obviously there is a cultural background there in terms of, the elephants providing the tourists with the so-called entertainment that may be pleasurable for the tourists, but is anything but for the elephants concerned. It completely, as we know, denies them their choices. It forces them to be at the behest of tourists clambering all over their backs in uncomfortable chairs, not being able to have the choices of when they want to eat or when they want to sleep, or it's something that has been a project very close to our hearts, and I think as well, just understanding that tourism really needs to face a very severe fact that animals do not consent to this sort of behaviour. And so this is where we wanted to sort of drill down in helping not just the elephants, but looking at the stakeholders concerned and trying to find solutions, as we are doing in bear bar farming. And I'd like to maybe come back to that, because I know that you had a question above that about bear bar farming, and about the alternatives. But in terms of elephant riding tourism, what we're doing now in southern Vietnam is to work with the authorities there in Dak Lak province, and in a wonderful place called Yok Don National Park, where we are working with the government. We are working with the owners of the elephants to take them now, to provide compensation for the owners, and take not just the elephants into the forest, but the mahouts as well. So to be giving them, a viable salary every month, that where before they were controlling the elephants, with the cruel bull hooks and having them at the behest of the tourists, now they're walking in the forest with their mahouts, free of chains and abundance of choices that they have in the forest about what to eat, where to sleep, where to go, how to spend their energy. And it's something that collaborates with the government and with the communities, but it allows again those elephants to have their days back in the forest where they belong.
That's such a beautiful thing. The reason I also asked you this question, because it also pertains to, as you said, elephants are close to something that you all are working on. But given in India, we've also had this issues, because when it comes to traditions, I don't know whether you're aware of it or not. In India, we also have this place where donkeys are absolutely crushed for the sake of tourism and in the name of tradition, spirituality, or whatever you want to call it. There are places where they are used for transportations up at one of the Kedarnath Dham, that is what it is called, and a couple of places where they are absolutely abused, not treated too well, not getting enough of food, but the government still doesn't want. I mean, there are very few people, I would say, till date, looking into that, because that is also trying to touch a nerve with a lot of government votes. So that's the reason, that is one of the issues we face in India out here, seriously. I mean, elephants also, if you look at towards places in Rajasthan, the elephants and the camels are absolutely are having torrid times. Yeah, there is an organization that, what I understand, they are trying to work with the government to reduce the burden on the elephants, but we're still a long way away.
It is. It's not an overnight process at all, is it? It's really not, and it's down, I think, to trust, Anil, a lot. With the government, with the local communities, because when people's livelihoods are affected, that's, I think, where you've got the sort of crunch point, really, in terms of you can go one way or the other. And maybe I could, bring back to your. I know you had another question again about this collaboration. It's interesting to you, and it's interesting to us, because it's something that we celebrate, really, that our program in Vietnam especially is such a holistic program with talking about the the extraction of bear bile and how, again, easily and cheaply it can be replaced by herbs. And it's exactly that we are doing now in the community, in the bear farming communities of Vietnam. So it's, one of the alternatives that we worked with was with the traditional medicine practitioners. In fact, one whole association of some 60,000 members promised that they would no longer prescribe or sell bear bile, and that they would indeed look to the herbal alternatives. And that sparked an idea with a local business group called Cocoon, who then said, well, we'd like to produce a herbal rubbing balm to help with people's bruising on their skin, which is what bear bile was used for previously. And so, together, working with the traditional medicine doctors, they produced this herbal rubbing balm. And then we worked with the Traditional Medicine Association even further by having clinics in the hotspot areas of bear farming. So doctors would go along, give their services for free to the elderly community, sit them down, look at their profiles, give them proper examinations. And then if there was anything that bear bile would have previously treated, the doctors then took the free balm that we had funded together with Cocoon, the business group, and handed these out, dispensed these to those people. And the feedback we had from the elderly, they said that it wasn't only as good as bear bile, but it was better than bear bile. So this was coming full circle. And indeed, in fact, in the local schools in the community, they are now growing those same herbal alternatives. So it's a wonderfully rounded program involving education, traditional medicine, and indeed, even stakeholders of the industry. We had one bear farmer that actually came along to the clinic, took some of this herbal balm, and then promptly came back the next month and said he wanted more. So,
wow, that's inspiring. Now, the emotional toll of confronting cruelty can be immense. How does Animals Asia support the well-being, resilience, and ethical grounding of the teams on the front lines?
That's a wonderful question, Anil, and it's something I'm delighted to be answering because obviously, our team are our frontline staff and they're the heart of the success of this organization and the programs we run to help animals. But at the heart of them, of course, there are consequences as well in terms of, our beloved bears, our elephants, they do pass away. And this affects our teams very, very deeply. And so because of that, we have a very robust human resources department. We have a global employment assistance program. And it's not just the team on the ground. It's not just our frontline staff, our administration staff, our supporter engagement, our fundraising team. We can't deny that everyone has their favorite bears or their favorite elephants. And so when they pass away, this facility, this resource to our team is there for them to call psychological help whenever they need it, and to be able to provide that resource, freely to them. A hotline, if you like, to help them with any advice that they like, on helping their mental health. We build a very positive culture within our staff in terms of learning and development. One of the ways that we do that, and of course this lifts the whole organisation, because we have veterinary interns that we also train now to become junior veterinary surgeons. Which is the most wonderful thing. We have, I think, 8 trained junior veterinary surgeons now as they learn their way through the ranks of veterinary practice, and take their knowledge now into working with the veterinary team. And in fact, the whole purpose of this is to inspire their peers, if you like, in Vietnam, so that the sanctuaries can be run, as well by local Vietnam veterinary staff. So it's full circle again, and it really helps them. And the final thing I think I'd like to say is that it's all down to communication, I think. And one of the the good things that we have, which it might be of help to other organizations if they haven't got it already, is something as simple as an internal channel. We use Slack. I don't know if I'm allowed to be advertising, but it's a wonderful channel that allows people to hop on to a whole a whole raft of um, internal issues and subjects, if you like, not just the programs and not just things like finance and human resources and operations, but things like staff announcement, Friday Smile, to have people posting fun things on a Friday, celebrations, what has happened to you in your life, what is your birthday, if you got married, or other fun things to share, and also most importantly, of course, a well-being channel as well.
Absolutely. Now that's wonderful. Now, moving forward, could you share an initiative or decision that didn't unfold as hoped? How that experience reshaped your approach to advocacy or strategy? Not everything goes according to how we plan as humans.
That has got to be the understatement of the year, hasn't it? Yeah. Well, it was really a plan that I was advised to start in 2007. So I'd started Animals Asia in 1998. And by 2007, I think it was very clear that, my background wasn't management at all. I used to work in television in the UK. When I came over to Hong Kong, I was working with vets. But I just knew that I wanted to start an organization in 1998. But over the years, it became clear that my management prowess had left a lot to be desired, frankly. And I think it's really, really important for us as CEOs, as founders of organization, to admit our vulnerabilities. And that's exactly what I did in 2007. I was speaking to someone that ran strategic planning processes in India, believe it or not, at the Asia for Animals conference in Chennai. And her name was Kervil. And she just said, I think you need a strategic planning process and you're going to need big shoulders, because the first thing that we do is run a survey organizational wide when everything, warts and all, will come out. And she warned me. She said most CEOs, they abandon when they see the responses, when they read the answers, they abandon the whole process. And she said, you've got to promise me that you don't do that. And I did. I dived into it, I think, with a very honest approach, because I wanted to see what was going on in this foundation that I loved so much and the people that I respected so much. And I wanted to, I think, educate myself as well as, the leaders in the organization. And so she was right. The survey was done. The response was uncomfortable. We found that we had bottlenecks in the organization in terms of oversight and management. I was reading about things like founders syndrome, where you just want to do everything and you're not giving your managers the flexibility of making decisions and indeed making mistakes for themselves. And that whole thing, it just changed everything about the organization. So, I read, I never thought I would quote David Beckham, by the way, in this interview, but I read just only the other week, he said that children are allowed to fail. And I believe that adults are allowed to fail by by the same definition. And so it taught me as a CEO, again, to be vulnerable, to listen to advice about how your organization is run and perhaps how it can be run a lot better. And at the end of the day, I just coined a frame for really myself, but I hope it applies to maybe some people listening. It's simply to be brave, be honest, and be kind.
Just the words that people need to listen. If you would look at my LinkedIn post this morning, it's all about leadership and how leaders need to let go instead of having to control everything. You need to let go. You need to delegate. You need to let your colleagues, your subordinates do their mistakes and learn from it rather than, you trying to control them and trying to control the outcome and trying to take the credit for everything. You just need to let go of it. If you
A
can do
hundred,
that.
a
Sorry.
hundred. No, I'm just agreeing wholeheartedly with you, Anil. I think it's why we have such amazing leaders now in the Animals Asia organization. We really do. From our veterinary teams to all of our administration, our HR, our operations, our finance, our fundraising, supporter engagement, communications. The list goes on and on and on. People are here to lead in their own domain and to do it well. And by gosh, they do exactly that.
Absolutely. Now, beyond rescue, how do sanctuaries function as instruments of education, diplomacy, and long term systemic change?
Oh, they are the focal point for all of those processes, Anil. They really are. They're central to this. The sanctuaries embody everything that we do at Animals Asia and everything that we are, because here you have animals that have been taken from the very depths of misery and pain and have now at last, as I said earlier, been allowed to make the choices that they should freely be making in their lives. And from that, of course, then you've got the components of public education, you've got the components of change in terms of influencing, other such campaigns to be successful. And you've got government authorities with whom you work and who have shown great leadership in this whole new venture to be able to stand on the stage and shine that they've been responsible for the outcome of what we've been able to do together. And again, it's no more clear than that than in Vietnam, where again, we're on the cusp of ending bear farming this year because of promises made, because of the sanctuaries, because the government have seen, the transition of bears from farms to freedom and have been able to make a very bold choice, again, the first time in the world for bear farming that a government has stood up and said it will end by 2026. And that's what's happening this year when the last bear comes home.
We keep our fingers crossed. But I think, if I'm not mistaken to say this, it it is a collective effort from Animals Asia and the people on the government, willingness of the government to accept, yes, they need to coexist and they need to end something that is not right.
Again, 100%. And I think the government in Vietnam, they made the decision because they could see that despite being advised by the bear farming community that bear farming was helping bears in the wild by not killing them for their whole gallbladders, actually it was creating a whole new industry of, bringing these bears in, putting them into cages, exploiting them, harming their bodies from the very extraction of the bile in the first place, and seeing the numbers in the wild obviously depleting as they are now. There's probably less than 100 now in the wild in Vietnam. So, it was a very sophisticated decision by the government of Vietnam, which we applaud to this day. And, we look to, this is not just the end, with the last bear coming into the sanctuary this year, it's us continuing with the Vietnam government to make sure that bear farming doesn't just end, but stays ended into the future. And then perhaps start, looking hopefully at perhaps, wild release programs, other programs now into the community where we can help more and different wild animals. And so this ripple effect just continues.
Absolutely. And you rightly said, the willingness, we need to applaud the government and the people, the stakeholders' willingness to really accept and say, hey, this is something that we need to prevent and put an end to. So, yes, absolutely. Now, you've spent decades witnessing both suffering and transformation. How do you personally sustain hope without denial, especially during slow or politically complex periods?
I am by nature a very optimistic person. And I think actually that breeds, optimism within the whole organisation. We never, my old dad used to say, "Don't tell me how you can't do a thing, tell me how you can." And also he'd say, "Hit it hard." So if ever I have a bad morning and I don't want to get out of bed, my dad's words reverberate in my mind to hit it hard. And I think again, we have that team spirit with us, and we can see the influence this organisation is having, in terms of the programs that we operate in this region. And by definition, we've achieved one of our founding goals to end bear bile farming in Vietnam. We've seen cats and dogs now removed from the livestock list in China, which is a wonderful step by the authorities in terms of, closing down the illegal trade of dog consumption. So it is a long journey. As I said earlier, it's not going to happen overnight. But when you do work with the community, with stakeholders, with government, with people invested, in these areas, and you make sure that their livelihoods are not affected, I think that's the crux of this industry. It's worth ploughing more funding, from the very, very start into something that is totally going to be sustainable, and see progress from all the different angles.
Absolutely. Now, you've described this as critically important year for ending bear bile farming, which we've been talking about in Vietnam. Why is this moment so significant, and what is it at stake right now?
It's the goal for which we were founded, and to imagine that from the end of this year, once the last bear comes through our gates and the last farm is closed, that bear farming will no longer exist in Vietnam, of course, is not just all of our dreams come true, but it's actually, I think, the culmination of why Animals Asia was founded, and a reason, as Jane Goodall always said, a reason for hope in the community, that together we can work on a practice that has no place perhaps in the modern world, and we can also work on the solutions that it needs. So, for example, again, the traditional medicine community are not going to be out of pocket, because now they have the herbal alternatives to sell in the place of bear bile. The community are not going to be affected by, once taking bear bile, but now taking the herbal alternative, which again we know works just as well as bear bile, or even better, for their health. So it's really this coming together of everybody to show a success in a campaign that finally brings the bears, to having maybe a place in traditional medicine, and now having their place as being able to behave like bears for the first time in their lives, and never having to go back to those days of being exploited for their body fluid.
Absolutely. Now, coming towards the end of the show, or the last two questions, for those who have been listening to us or this conversation, what would you most want them to do to stand with Animals Asia and support this decisive phase of your work?
Please just hop on to our brand new website, www.animalsasia.org. It is a lovely looking website. It's taken years in the making, thanks to our amazing creative teams. And it showcases all the programs that we are involved in, and especially in this last and challenging and happy year of ours, again, to end bear farming in Vietnam. Of course, hop on to LinkedIn, please, and Insta and Facebook and X and all the social networks. We need the help of everybody worldwide to free the final bears.
Absolutely. Now, coming to the last question, when you imagine a future where bear bile farming is finally a thing of the past, what do you believe this victory will represent, not just for bears, but for animal protection movements, worldwide?
again, I think it shows that collaboration and kindness is key. You know, one of our taglines is kindness in action, and it's only, you know, again, as Jane Goodall said, it's having that that peace of mind, that presence of mind as well, to work deeply within communities and with government officials to show that practices of the past can be put to one side now in preference for how we are treating this world today. It is not sustainable. You know, pretty much everything that we are doing, everything that we are looking at our lives needs to change. And I think, you know, by ending bear farming in Vietnam, we are showcasing the fact that no one has to suffer for the lack of bear bile, that, you know, that stakeholders can still make money, that governments can see huge success by showing wisdom to bring these practices to an end. And that, you know, how we look at our fragile earth now has to be accelerated, whether it's we remember to turn the lights off at night, whether we remember to turn the water off when we're brushing our teeth, when we look more consistently at a plant-based diet, because obviously, you know, a meat-based diet is becoming less and less sustainable for this earth as well. So if we can just look again at what we buy, what we wear, what we eat, all of these different areas, you know, together, I think, again, as Jane said, we can make an enormous impact on this suffering earth. It's really, if humankind, it's all about kindness. If we can authentically and bravely and humanely be kind.
Absolutely. Jill, this is the part where I leave like an open mic for the guest to speak their heart out. If they want to make an appeal for fundraise or anything, this is the floor for you.
Oh gosh, well, thank you again. Please, everyone, if you've enjoyed this interview, and it's been a privilege to talk with you, Anil, thank you for asking such wise and kind questions. And again, to urge the community that this year is bringing bear farming to an end, and we need the help of everybody in the world to support the Vietnam government, to support the community, the traditional medicine discipline as well, to keep our promise and to please, yes, keeping bears is one of the most expensive things ever. And the one big thing we do need is the finance and the means to be able to do that, not just because of the bears we're rescuing now, but because, of course, think of it as a pension plan for the rest of these bears' lives, their 30-year lifespan. So it's a big job, but it's not over. And those bears will need our help and our support and our kindness for many, many years to come. So if people can find it in their hearts to please help us, we'd be very, very grateful.
Absolutely. Jill, thank you very much for taking the time from your busy schedule to be on the show. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
It's been a privilege. Thank you so much for inviting me.